David's here. Let me pop David in.
All right, pop him in then.
David,
howdy.
Hello, David. I think this is the first time we've talked.
Yeah, the first time we've actually communicated with words rather than message.
Words, yeah. Well, with spoken words, we should say.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too, man.
So David published something. When did you publish it? Yesterday or today?
Like an hour ago.
Like an hour ago.
So today. Very much today.
Yeah.
So very early on, we're going to do a little live reading of the article you just wrote.
Okay, I guess if you want to do a live reading, I don't know. I just jokingly brought it up. But
well, we didn't plan anything for today, so you gave us something to do.
Hell yeah.
Because we didn't plan.
I could always read the Spanish version of the Hopper Moss book.
Start live reading.
That works.
Okay, how do I set my screen again? Present screen.
We're true console professionals.
They updated the UI on StreamYard. I'm not. Is it working?
Yeah,
it's loading.
Looks like it's working on my end.
Is it? How legible is it? We'll full screen and see if it's. Yeah, it's pretty legible.
I can read it.
Yeah, it looks fine to me.
Okay, David, since you wrote it, do you want to be the one to read it?
Yeah, I can certainly read it, but I basically wrote this article about why I'm no longer a libertarian, and it's not like I'm not trying to go at it from a lot of these dorky former libertarians are like libertarians don't have it in them to seize power or something like that. I think that's a dorky argument. That's not really an argument. I think that's an argument about political strategy rather than political philosophy. And so I didn't try to
pragmatic argument, not a moral one.
Yeah. So I'm making more of a moral argument about why I can't hold this position. Basically, I hold this one axiom to be true, and that axiom refutes libertarianism necessarily, at least from my point of view, I would say. So that's basically, why I'm no longer libertarian. After 3 years of being a Rothbardian libertarian, I realized that libertarianism is contrary to important moral positions and places other moral questions into a precarious place.
True.
Yeah, so basically, I don't know. So you just want me to do like a full reading and then you guys stop me whenever?
Yeah, we'll stop you every once in a while.
I feel your experience will be very similar to mine because I was a libertarian for around 3 years and I read pretty much every Rothbard book I could get my hands on. I think I read everything Hoppe ever published in English. I haven't read his 2 German books, unfortunately. And even when I stopped being a libertarian, I still read Economy, Society, and History. So, I can even say that.
That's my favorite Hoppe book right there. That's a great book.
I still love Democracy, man. Partly because the audiobook narrator is so good, and it's for free on Spotify. Like, that's awesome.
It's for free on Spotify? Because whenever I try to do the audiobooks on Spotify, it tells me you have to pay for this thing or buy it outside of the app.
Oh, no. Meezy's published it for free on Spotify, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, awesome. That sounds
Which
great.
was a shock for me. I don't know. I think I may have stumbled upon it, or I was listening to a lot of Jeff Dice podcasts, and Spotify just randomly recommended it to me, and I was like, oh, really? Oh, okay, then. And I was very pleasantly surprised. It's a really good narrator.
Yeah. I'll have to check it out. But I mean, I'm not saying that I still call myself an Austrian, like as far as like an Austrian economist wise, but like I can't subscribe to libertarianism as an ethical philosophy.
Was he call yourself an Austro-Thomist?
I don't know if I'd call myself a Thomist, considering I'm not exactly sure what all of Thomism what all it entails.
You don't have to know that.
You could actually find out relatively quickly because there are the 24 Theses, which were published in like the turn of the 20th century, and they are basically the guiding post for what it means to be a Thomist, and they're fairly quick to go through. So we can do that after you read this.
Yeah, I can't promise that I'll be able to understand everything that's in those because I remember looking back, like I think last year, and being like, I don't understand any of this. Maybe it'll click now that I've been baptized and confirmed. Now the scales have fallen from my eyes.
That's right. You guys are both confirmed this Easter. Let's go.
Hey, it's awesome to hear, man. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, it took a few years because I realized I actually needed to reach out for a sponsor because every fucking person in my family is not fucking confirmed, dude. I was shocked. Like, my mom's not confirmed. My dad's not confirmed. It's like my aunt's not confirmed. They're all really Catholic, but it just wasn't like a worry for their parents. Partly because both their dads died when they were really young. And so it's like, it wasn't a thing. So I needed to actually really look for a sponsor like halfway through the process. Like the catechist called me, hey man, can you tell me who your sponsor is? And I was like, oh, Oh shit! I need to look for someone.
You see, I made it like I think four or five classes before they were like, yeah, you got to find a sponsor for this rite of acceptance thing we got to do. And it was after like kicking the can down the road for like 2 years of being just like, you know, a teenager and everything, you know, being a typical American degenerate teenager.
And I got super lucky because I was just told like your sponsor is going to be the deacon. I'm like, cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
You just gave me
no.
one. I'm like, awesome.
Our
Let's go.
catechist was the sponsor for 2 of the people because we had. I think I was the second youngest one there at 23.
Nice.
Aside from one, maybe 2 other girls, because there was like 2 different catechism classes, and we were both. Everyone was confirmed in the same day, but we had a few first communions. So I'm Brazilian, right? So most people here are baptized. Like, dude, even Jews get baptized. It's crazy. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, I know Jewish people who have been baptized. And, like, everyone is baptized. But if your parents, like, don't really care or if they're not really into it's just like a thing you do, baptism. So if your parents don't really care, they're not really paying attention to a faith, or if they stop practicing, it's like you don't even do first communion. So we actually had a couple, like 4 first communions this Easter.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and so it just makes it sound like, you know, the cultural Catholicism is taken to like the very ends, and it's like you just approach him and be like, "Listen, I know you guys are in the synagogue right now, but you know you belong to Jesus." So.
Very much so.
All right. Do you want me to get started on reading this then?
Please do.
All right. Like any right-wing American teenager, I spent time identifying as a libertarian. Libertarianism was an attractive ideology. Between the COVID-19 lockdowns that claimed 2 years of my youth, wars that never seemed to end, and an increasing disappearing chance at economic prosperity, the idea that the fault must be a government came across as compelling. That's already a typo, I notice. Libertarianism was my first endeavor into real political philosophy of thinking critically about policy positions rather than just saying I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. I think a phase of libertarianism is not bad for anyone who wants to be aware of critical thought and analysis in politics, but it is where libertarian gets when it hits the freeway and begins to hit 75 miles per hour that worries me. It is a consistent political philosophy, to say the least. You can't accuse it of having contradictions, but that is what makes you question it if you hold certain views. Those strongly held views have, in the past few months, led me out of libertarianism.
Can we pause for a second here? Because I do very strongly agree with you that I think being a libertarian for a few years really helped me with searching for consistency with any other philosophy I sort of want to subscribe to, in a sense. I don't know if subscribe would be the right word, but really the very high concern the libertarians have for consistency. I know it's become a meme, and in a way, rightfully so, amongst a certain, for if you're a political philosophy, seizing power should be at least some part of your doctrine. I think you should have at least some guys concerned about that somewhere. But the fact that they do really worry about consistency and, philosophical principle, even when you disagree with them, it's like, that's sort of admirable. And that is a thing that you should emulate, where if you really dive deep into libertarianism for a few years, that's one really positive outcome that you'll probably come away with.
Yeah, and I think the thing with me that I don't know how much I get into it itself, but at its core, like, I wanted to be a consistent libertarian. Like, I wanted to hold my positions and for those positions to be taken seriously and to be able to defend those positions. And I don't feel like I can defend all of those positions if I'm having these contradictions that people can point out. They could be like, well, why do you apply it in this standard but not the other? And so then I reach some of these situations where it's like, I just can't support this position. And so I'm like, I don't feel like I can hold an ethical philosophy that isn't consistent, right? Because then you walk into these contradictions that make your arguments just fall flat on their face. That's why you have to have those consistent philosophies. Otherwise, I feel like there's like, there's in the libertarian sphere, you see like people like Liquid Zulu or whatever, and he does like, therefore, he does like, if you justify this small little thing, it would lead to Hitler or whatever. And I think that can be true, like if you're making concessions and contradictions, but I don't think it's true just about libertarianism. I think it's true if you have an ethical philosophy that's consistent, that if you deviate from that, it can allow these things. But if you have a consistent philosophy, you're not going to wander into these problems if you correctly apply them. Whereas if you don't, then you might fall into these stumbling blocks where it's like, oh, now I'm playing apologism for these things as well, so that way I can maintain principles in one area or another.
Now I know when I was libertarian, like the consistency was a big draw forward because like among my friend group is very particular. There. As long as you're consistent, that's all that really matters. And then I began going through the consistency. Like, yeah, but I'm consistently in more. There's a lot of consistencies that lead to these in more actions. Like, yeah, obviously I can't be. So if it's consistent and more, there must be some underlying issue with the principles, which I think is a good rational view to hold.
Yeah, Aristotle actually makes this point in the Physics when he's talking about Parmenides and Zeno, and the Eleatic monists, basically the people who, if I remember correctly, are static monists, so they don't believe there's any change in the world. And Aristotle makes the point, it's like, if you agree with their principles, like, they're actually extremely logical. Like, they follow from one premise to another. It's just that even a fucking madman knows that ice is not fire. And they're not the same thing, and therefore they're wrong. It's like very insane, dude.
Yeah,
like,
it's
they're
about
very logical, but their premise is crazy. I can't agree with that one.
Yeah, it's that core premise. And so that makes me like call into question like the libertarian position of like complete self-ownership. And I think that I don't know how to properly articulate it yet, and I'll get into that further into the article, but I don't know how to articulate it necessarily, but I just know that there has to be a problem here with the non-aggression principle per se at its core, or maybe the self-ownership that it underpins it. So I have to go into these things and try to figure that out. Like, this is going to be a lot more to properly have like an answer to libertarianism. I feel like I need to read a lot more ethical philosophy and just philosophy in general to properly go at it. Like, I don't have an answer to like not libertarian, therefore like I don't have like the other position necessarily. I don't know what political philosophy or ethical philosophy besides like just following the catechism that I subscribe to.
Localism. Take the peasant pill, Anon. Take the peasant pill.
I actually watched your episode today on localism and distributism, and I honestly was less convinced of it as a result.
Quince.
Hell yeah. That's
Quince,
what
I do like the
podcast
aesthetic. I do like the aesthetic in the reframing.
You globalist youths just don't understand local pride.
I do think the
I like my idea of a Spaniard empire a little too much to not support globalism.
I do think the localists sometimes make very I love Chesterton, but they sometimes make very zany economic arguments.
Yeah,
it's like dude, just I don't know. I agree with you in a lot of the moral stuff, but like your economic arguments are very little wacky sometimes.
Yeah, I suggested to Connor, I'm sure you saw that I suggested Joel Salatin's Folks This Ain't Normal, where he basically talks about the food system and the centralization of food and government interference in that causes the centralization. And I think it would fit really well into the Chesterton idea, because Joel Salatin's premise is basically we should be paying a little bit more for food because we should be paying for local food that is higher quality. I think that would definitely fits really well with the Chesterton distributism thing.
Yeah, very
you
much
guys
so.
keep talking. I will be right back. Someone's at the front door.
I was like, where's that dog coming from?
I also thought so.
It's like, that's not me. They don't allow dogs in college dorms. And so I was like, that's got to be Caleb.
I do have a dog, but it's sleeping over there, and it's a French bulldog. Its bark is not that fierce.
Yeah.
And that's not already a fierce bark. But one thing you mentioned is that you don't really have an answer. I still got to for argumentation ethics. Like, I think that's actually a really ingenious argument even now.
I think it's a really interesting concept. And I definitely think that there's something to the language aspect of like communication that certainly gets us somewhere. I just need to figure out like what is actually a sound premise to base that upon.
Yeah, it's only recently where I've been rereading a very good book, which I believe is Towards a New Ontology of Morals by the Catholic philosopher Henry Veitch, where he obviously doesn't address the argumentation ethics. He wrote this in like the 1960s, but he makes a very good argument of modern analytic ethics and existentialist ethics, which is he calls the transcendental turn, which he actually thinks Kant wouldn't do this for ethics, but it's a sort of move Kant does for ontology, where he sort of says, well, we can't really know things how they are. Like a lot of analysts will start with linguistic arguments like R.M. Hare, Philippa Foot, or even John Searle, they'll use linguistic arguments to establish morals. But when you really push them on it, they'll say, well, that's just how things appear to us because of how we use language and how we perceive other people. Whereas Henry Vich's whole argument is, if things aren't good in and of themselves, then who gives a shit? Is his basic argument. It's like, who cares? It's like, I don't care if a strawberry is good because it appears good. I care if a strawberry is good because it has these good qualities that a real strawberry should have, not because it appears to me to be good or some other thing. And it's not that long a book. It's like 160 pages, something like that. But it's a good book to get your hands on if you can. I think it's out of print, so you'll have to find a used copy somewhere. But it's really good. I highly recommend it.
Okay, gotcha. I'll have to check it out.
Are you
I'm
back,
back.
Caleb? Okay.
I'm back. Sorry.
I heard him giggle in the background. And I was like, "Oh, there's Caleb."
My the groceries were delivered, and then my sister and my niece showed up, and then the dog got out.
Who let the dogs out? All right. Do you want to
still have
continue
that
then?
cat?
No, so my sister took it.
Awful.
I know.
Trash.
I know. St. Edithstein, the cat has now been relabeled Kit Kat.
Come on.
Awful.
Can't take the cat's baptismal name. Can't take it from him.
No.
I'm
you're
gonna
really-
steal-
Metaphysically bonded.
I'm gonna steal the cat come Feast of St. Francis. I'm gonna steal her cats and her pets and get them all blessed and give them back to her. So hate that.
Dude, if there's ever a relic anywhere near you, because we had a piece of the True Cross like 2 weeks ago, just get your cat and touch it to the reliquary, and now it's a murder relic.
You got a
literally
second
a class, yeah.
Yeah, you have like a third class relic walking around
third
your
class.
house.
I got a few.
I know a
third-class
relic
relics.
can't touch the ground, but is it okay if it's alive?
Yo, of course, dude, that's awesome. You should. I mean, the priest is going to kill you, but
Let's grab my
like-
let's grab my relic rose. My rose was on my third class relic star and start like, and I bless the cat and I bless the dog.
I mean, you can make like, I don't know if fourth class exists, but if you touch a rosary to a relic, which is generally, not frowned upon, and then touch the rosary to the dog, that's a fourth or fifth class relic right there. If that category even exists.
Wonder if you can get rosary collars.
Tuned in just now for the out of context make you cat a third class relic. I'm sold. Thank you, Connor.
Really, that's one of my most ingenious ideas I've had in years, man.
Big brain time, man. Big brain.
Now this is catechizing.
I'm gonna clip that. I'm gonna have to clip that for a TikTok short.
Dude, I'm gonna
Right.
take a picture of my cat and the catechism together. And I'm gonna post that on Twitter.
That's a good one.
That's the stupidest shit. It's awesome. I love it.
That's so good.
The Catholic Church.
Let's get back to the reading.
All right. So, not out of
Oh,
some.
yeah.
Okay, so I was basically saying it's a consistent philosophy, to say the least. Those strongly held views in the past have led me out of libertarianism. Not out of some appeal to libertarianism can't win or some other issue of political strategy, but out of the ethical ends it reaches. Some of its conclusions are frankly evil. I spent a good deal of time when I call myself a libertarian attempting to reconcile certain views with the ideology, but I couldn't. When libertarians who knew their theory well pushed me on it, I couldn't find answers. I read theory myself. I read For New Liberty by Murray Rothbard and half a dozen academic articles on libertarian ethical thought. I watched debates and found myself disappointed in their conclusions. The sides I agreed with seemed weak. They couldn't be grounded in the axioms that libertarianism relies upon.
Let me ask you: does he watch the Block and Keely Baldwin debate? Yeah,
I referenced that specifically in this article.
yeah. It's both. In case you didn't know, was pro-life libertarian versus block on evictionism versus pro-life libertarian ethics.
The
And I
most
think-
Jewish argument for abortion.
It really
ever.
is. Well, the baby doesn't pay
Keep
rent.
a fetus
Therefore, you can
didn't pay rent. Therefore,
therefore you can evict it. This is
we must
Oh.
evict it.
Did the fetus tip its landlord?
the block looks like the kind of guy who would say that shit. He looks so aggressively
Victory
Jewish.
for the land chads. Landlords stay winning. Dude, it's I can't even be mad at that argument for abortion. It's so funny. I know it's serious. Like, but come on, that's so ridiculous.
Yeah. But all right. Eventually, with my faith becoming stronger over time, I had to make a choice: the ethical principles of the church and God that I have faith in, or libertarianism. And here we are. I don't really have a political label. I wouldn't call myself a post-liberal or conservative, but I am most certainly not a libertarian anymore. Libertarianism fails to establish a sound, encompassing philosophy and concedes the evil conclusions on the most core issues of life. Thus, I am no longer a libertarian. So
Very good.
that's the end of the first section. And I was really proud of this stupid title, There and Back Again, My Journey into and Out of Libertarianism.
No, we've all been there. Don't worry. I've also written similar things.
I was 12. Sorry, Caleb, what were you about to say?
Sorry, I just saw it's breaking news on Twitter. Some gay guy took Joe Biden's hand and started singing a Lana Del Rey song, and Joe Biden called him a faggot.
I saw that tweet. I saw that.
Oh, base president. Let's go.
That's right, your holy pontiff. Roe v. Wade's been overturned. I've encouraged the March for Life to march.
Listen, Trump accused Joe Biden of blasphemy, and Joe Biden has called some dude a faggot. I'm just saying, we're back.
We're back. This is
back,
American
baby.
Politics.
We're back in our prime, baby. Let's get
Dude,
awesome.
Donald Trump was selling Bibles. We're really bad.
Make America great again, baby.
Does he offer a Catholic edition? How many books are in the Trump Bible? Canonized at the Council of Mar-a-Lago.
The Council of Mar-a-Lago. I mean,
Jared Kushner was the dissenter, and he was banished as a heretic.
He might be missing with deuterocanonical books, but apparently it comes with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So you know,
oh my God.
Mom, can we get
how's that for divine inspiration?
Mom, can we have the deuterocanonical books? Mom, we have the deuterocanonical books at home. The deuterocanonical books at home.
Yeah, that's incredibly American. Again, I can't.
I'm disappointed he didn't rename the King James version after himself.
King Donald version.
No, the new King Baron version.
King Baron version.
I'm convinced. I don't know what my politics are. All I know is I'm a monarchist because I want King Baron Trump. Better yet, Emperor Baron Trump.
Very good. Yes, that's how it should be.
I was 12 years old when Donald Trump was inaugurated. In fact, my 12th birthday was that very day. 2016 was a unique year in that for the first time, my peers and I were talking about politics. I was raised in a home that really didn't discuss politics. I loosely remember watching the 2012 election coverage over my dad's shoulder, but I cannot remember who he supported. Just that Barack Obama was the president and he won again. I loosely believed in ideas like, yeah, we should have equality for all. People should prove themselves on their merits. Why criminalize plants? Why was I aware of marijuana? I'm not sure. And why shouldn't gay people be able to marry?
Oh, yes. I sympathize with a lot of that.
Yeah.
2016 was a very weird turning point. Because I'm 4 years older than you. I was 16.
Yeah.
And like, even then, I remember, because I was in favor of Brexit from sort of a liberal, like proto-libertarian. I hadn't really read any libertarian, but from a libertarian point of view, it was like, well, I don't see why England should be subject to what some bureaucrats in Brussels say. And I was like, and my school, because I speak English because, well, this as well as I do, which might not be very well, but it's at least has some level of proficiency to it because of my school had a lot of British teachers. in it. And when the referendum results were announced and Brexit was declared victorious, I remember saying in class, "Yeah," and everyone looked at me like in a dead stare, including the teacher, and I was like, "Oh, okay." I would get into an argument with every teacher about this, dude. It's not even funny. They would literally make the class about that. Like, they were still friendly to me. They weren't trying to humiliate me, but they were trying to bring me over to their side. Like, I was still very friendly to the teachers after that. We got along well, especially with one of them who was probably an alcoholic. I especially liked him. I'm pretty sure one of the times he came into class in like sandals and shorts, he got out a bottle of Listerine, which I'm pretty sure was filled with gin or vodka, and then said, "Hey guys," and walked out. And we didn't have class that day, and it was awesome. It was like for me and 5 other people, because we were doing an elective class with him, and he was like, "Hey guys, bye." It was awesome. Love that guy. I actually learned a lot of history with him. He was a history teacher. Not even joking. Lovely man, but definitely an alcoholic. Anyway,
Good time.
2016 was a crazy year, man, both academically and politically for me.
Yeah. Okay, so but 2016 came along. I was an odd kid who liked to watch the news in the mornings and at nights. I was always an odd kid, but especially then. So I saw all of the ads in the run up to the election that made Donald Trump seem like a demagogue. In fact, the morning after the election, upon learning he had won, I asked my mom, "Is the world going to end?" Yes, it is true. I was the kid that the Twitter Democrat moms claimed their child was.
I'm so tempted just to remove you from the chat now, David.
I know it's one of
for
my
the past
funniest.
quiz.
It's one of my funniest stories. Don't worry, it gets worse. But I stopped paying attention to politics until about 2018. By then I was 14, going into 8th grade, and started watching YouTube in my free time. I was interested in politics and started watching Steven Crowder's Change My Mind shows. These episodes of his show had him sitting in a college campuses with a provocative statement, quote unquote, "Donald Trump is not a racist," or "socialism sucks," and then change my mind. Crowder would invite students to sit down and discuss the issues with him for a long time, offering them the chance to change his mind on the issue. Crowder was, of course, much better at these discussions than 19 to 21-year-old college kids who hadn't seen the world, so he did well.
Yeah.
What Crowder did was open my eyes to the issue that has remained my number one issue ever since: abortion. Abortion was something that seemed so patently evil. That is so patently evil. The killing of a child in the womb is a despicably evil and tragic act. I still don't understand how someone could hold a view otherwise. Someday I will write a longer and more in-depth piece that describes how I think it should be approached. But the point is largely that Crowder made me aware of the issue. I began to absorb content related to conservatives debating liberals, especially on abortion. I watched Ben Shapiro debate woke leftists on college campuses from his podium and loved watching it. I became impassioned on the issue of abortion. About that time, I entered 9th grade and had to take a civics class. As a part of that class, we had to study the political spectrum and debate some issues on with our class. Our 2 topics were marijuana legalization and abortion. I took the pro side on marijuana and the anti-abortion on the latter. To this day, I feel I did poorly arguing the message of life. I lost that debate in rhetoric, though not in fact, and I will not let myself live that down to this day. Around the same time, my dad gave me a book by Charles Murray called What It Means to Be a Libertarian, a Manifesto. Today, it is very much a minarchist treatise by the controversial author. Minarchism is a libertarian view that believes in the night watchman state that exists only to defend liberty. This book had me from the beginning. I started to call myself a classical liberal as a result. I thought government was largely an opponent to freedom and prosperity. I believed that the market could largely bring more prosperity to America. For the first time, I thought about economics and regulation, whether force was needed to be used against so-called peaceful people. I held on to these views for a long time. Jordan Peterson seemed to call himself a classical liberal. Dave Rubin, who I was a fan of at the time, called himself one. But I couldn't call myself a libertarian. Libertarians, I thought, were pro-choice. They took the idea of my body, my choice to the extreme and justified killing children. It was fall 2019 when I began to watch Tim Pool. I'm telling you, it just gets worse. Tim Pool,
dude.
Yeah, you went from Charles Murray to Tim Pool. That's a hell of a slippery slope, dude. Like, I don't know, from the guy who wrote the bell curve to, yeah, I watched Tim Pool.
I didn't know what the bell curve was, to be honest.
Dude,
I thought he was just a libertarian philosopher, to be honest. That's all I thought he was.
Yeah, he kind of became famous for that. And Rothbard actually, before he was a libertarian, Rothbard really complimented the bell curve in at least pissing off the New York Times. He has like a small review of it, which was somewhat funny. Like Rothbard doesn't really talk about race at all, but he's like, because Murray is not at all racist in that book. He's like, no, this is a real problem for equality that we should really get our minds around and try to help African Americans. And he's like, he's very much like he's very like liberal in his sensibilities on the racial issues. So is Steve Saylor, by the way. He just owns up to statistics. He really kind of really cares for these populations of minorities that no one else seems to give a shit about and just pretend they don't the disparities don't exist. He's actually very heartfelt about his concern.
Twitter is an ocean, and Steve Saylor is the shark.
Yeah, very
He's
much
Jaws.
so.
We're gonna need a bigger sample size.
Dude, at this point, like when people post like the the Bible Belt map or any map which the Bible Belt shows up with a higher percentage of, so it could be obesity, it could be murder, it could be whatever.
I just
And then
sigh and click replies.
Yeah, and then underneath it, it's like, yep, am I gonna find him? Yes, I am.
There he is.
Has he ratioed the original post? Yes, he has.
Like a moth to a flame.
Okay. It's just engagement bait at this point. You might as well tag him. Like, you might as well post a map and just tag him and say, fuck it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So it was fall 2019 when I began to watch Tim Pool. Tim Pool had begun to blow up with his guests and news commentary at the time, and my dad watched him. He suggested I watch to see this guy he had seen. His name was Michael Malice, and he called himself an anarchist. I found him fascinating. Malice introduced me to the idea that the media only congratulated Trump when he did acts of war. I hadn't thought of this before and began to watch Tim Pool religiously. Around that time, I was beginning to think about religion and had been introduced to the idea that science and religion need not be in opposition to each other. During the pandemic, some Catholics from an online chat group convinced me of the existence of God, and that would lead to me being baptized and confirmed into the Catholic Church this Easter. But I was beginning to think more about politics and political philosophy. I wanted to be right. I wanted to see an end to abortion and this much smaller government. Michael Malice led me to a libertarian named Dave Smith. Dave Smith is a comedian, podcaster, and libertarian political commentator. Dave gave me my first real delve into libertarianism. It seemed to be classical liberalism taken to its conclusions. It was anti-war, anti-Fed, pro-freedom, and pro-market. That intrigued me. It introduced me to Dr. Ron Paul, a pro-life libertarian, and that was interesting to me, but I was still not convinced. I wanted an answer. This Dave Smith guy seemed to be right about everything, especially during the now lockdowns, but could I accept his ideology? I looked for an answer. I came to a tentative answer in the form of a debate between Walter Block and Kerry Baldwin. Kerry presented what I thought was a sound argument for being pro-life and a libertarian. Of course, the child had a right to bodily autonomy, as I had been saying for years, and shouldn't be killed for another's crimes. I took this as her argument and thought it was a well-grounded in libertarianism. So I began to call myself a libertarian. I began to study economics so I would know what I was talking about when I debated a socialist. That study of economics would lead to my current field of study, pursuing a formal degree in economics. I still love economics and Austrian economics especially, but I'm not sure about libertarianism. I soon began to call myself an anarcho-capitalist like Murray Rothbard, as I saw it as the natural conclusion to libertarianism. I still believe that the anarcho-capitalists are the most consistent libertarians, but I cannot be one. I still appreciate and, in fact, love to read Rothbard, but as an economist, historian, and commentator rather than a political philosopher. Many of my closest friends are libertarians. Many of the commentators I enjoy are libertarians. I believe libertarians offer a great analysis of the modern state and its nature, but I don't think libertarianism is an ethical philosophy.
That's actually a really good point. I think even Moldbug sort of makes it in the beginning of his, I think in the first post, really, of Unqualified Reservations, where he sort of talks about how he's not a libertarian and why. He says he checks on Mises.org every day for articles. And it's like, yeah, I'm not the same now, but when I was really caring about when I really cared about current events and wanted an analysis, usually the first people I turned to would still be the libertarians last year. I sort of became apathetic to political events and analyses of thereof. But really, when I want a sound take, a biased take, obviously, but I know their biases and I know what they think, I usually turn to a lot of libertarians and just ask. And if I have any friends which are online, I just ask them questions. I find it very enlightening.
Right. I think the libertarians, like the libertarian hyperfixation on seeing what's wrong with whatever government does, allows them to basically be like, the autistic libertarian and dig through, here's what the, X, Y, or Z thing is. Like, here's what this thing is actually doing. Here's how it actually affects this thing. And I think that's helpful because you need the weaponized autist to actually dig through all this crap legislation and tell us what's going on, what things we're supposedly ignoring for the sake of the culture war, which I think is a misnomer. I don't think you're ignoring anything when you pay attention to, like something like surrogacy. They'll be like, the libertarians will cast it aside and be like, oh, you're paying attention to the culture war, so you don't really pay attention to, this war, this inflation.
A real war. Yeah.
It's like, I don't think it's a distraction that people are cutting their kids' genitals off in the name of them becoming boys or girls when they're not.
I think it's worse than paying taxation, if you can believe it.
Yeah, I'd be willing to pay sales tax if they didn't allow that.
Yeah, I'd pay VAT if they stopped chopping off genitals off of kids. I'd be willing to pay VAT with a smile on my face. I'll tell you, South American VAT ain't no joke, dude. It's fucking rough down here.
I'll tip my IRS agent if they go and prohibit abortion. If they save kids' lives in the womb, I will tip my IRS agent.
Yeah, dude, same.
Yeah.
Do the same here.
Yeah.
I'd happily pay more taxes.
But looking back now, I realize that libertarianism isn't an ethical philosophy. I realize that Kerry Baldwin's arguments for why libertarians can be pro-life largely miss the point, and that Walter Block was largely correct on the right libertarian position as it comes to abortion. Abortion is so obviously wrong. I think that there are sound counters to the arguments in favor of abortion on every ground. But if one accepts libertarianism, they can't hold these views. So when faced with the choice of accepting abortion's existence as a morally legitimate action or leaving libertarianism, I chose the latter. So then I go and delve into,
that's actually a very good point. I think that's how I don't know a lot of people, but that's certainly how I left libertarianism. When I really it was mostly about maybe it was pornography or maybe it was something else where I really kind of struggled to I think the government should ban this, but also there shouldn't be a government, but also a just society without the government would ban this. So I guess that's a lot of mental gymnastics to just say, I think the government can just ban this thing because it's bad. That's a lot of mental, it's the same with abortion. I think the government should ban it because any, covenant society would ban it. But I can't be sure any covenant society would ban it. So it's a lot of mental gymnastics to just say this thing is evil and should be banned. And it's I'll just say that from now on. This thing is evil and it should be banned. But not pragmatically, I suppose. But I still actually sympathize with a libertarian position that I would say it would be better if it was banned in a libertarian society, because that means that we are more peaceful and more wealthy or whatever. But I'm fine with using force to ban it as well.
Right. I mean, it was the same thing with abortion, where I'd be like, well, libertarianism prohibits abortion or something, but right now the state has a monopoly on violence, and so it should protect, this. And it's well, I'm just justifying the state in intervening here, so I'll just own it. I'll own it. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, my leaving libertarians really had nothing to do with the ethical side of things. I actually still think Kerry Baldwin's arguments are valid, or the Hoppian self-ownership considered as self-stewardship, from God giving you stewardship of your body. I still think those are valid, legitimate arguments.
That's who's mostly, if I remember correctly.
I still think that's correct. For me, the leaving of libertarianism was the Austrian side of the economics thing, focusing on what's the one I'm looking for here? Prosperity and economic success is all. It's such a giant virtue focus on the virtues that come about from having AC and great medicine, all the technological successes and stuff, and economic success. I don't think it was actually good. I think they give too many options. So it's more my beef with libertarians more economic than anything. So I still think the ethical side of things is so valid almost.
Strangely enough, Paul Feyerabend, the Austrian post what would it be called? Is it post falsification philosopher? I don't know. He's mostly a philosopher of science, but he has some really strange points supporting Catholicism. He has a whole article on why Galileo fucking deserved it. Basically, it's really funny.
Awesome.
But he argues essentially that what did you just say? I sort of lost my train of thought.
The idea that artist prosperity is inherent virtue. That's the idea that artist successes are just inherently good for society.
If I remember correctly, he talks about different interpretations of reality and like how science is sort of trying to claim a monopoly. Science TM, I should say, because I do like science, and so does Paul Feyerabend especially. But he sort of says we're trying to be high priests of the world, whereas you can say but we can cure X and Y and Z diseases, and we can make people richer because we make energy production more efficient. And a Catholic mystic can say, well, that's very true. You can indeed cure X, Y, and Z diseases, and you can indeed make energy production more efficient, and so on and so forth. But can you save souls? Because if you can't, I'm not actually very impressed by your achievements.
Yeah.
They seem very paltry to me. It's like, yeah, well, that's actually a very good point. It's like, well, okay, yeah. Actually, it should be about the efficiency of saving souls. Who gives a shit about welfare, whatever? Yeah. These are save your treasures for heaven.
And I would argue the insane level of technological wealth that we have is actually a hindrance because what's that Bible? I can't remember the scripture verse, but our Savior said it's easier for a rich man into heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle.
Through the eye of a needle. To be fair, I do have a different interpretation of that verse than.
I want to quote Chesterton real quick. He said the solution, the modern solution to that parable is to genetically engineer smaller camels and make bigger needles.
Yeah, I remember that. That's really.
Which is so good.
Chesterton's so good. Is that in Paradoxes of Christianity? I forget.
I can't remember why I read it, but that's a great.
I think it's one of the chapters of Orthodoxy, if I remember correct. I might be wrong though, but that's really true.
I gotta get through Orthodoxy. I just I've been trying to get through the Everlasting Man, like I mentioned on the Discord server.
I love that book. I've read it.
But it's dense for me. Like I find it harder than reading Mises.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. Just Mises's prose just rolls easier for me than like Chester.
Lack of whimsy. Lacking.
I will say it's easier to read Hoppe. I couldn't let go of Democracy. I read it in 4 days or something. I would just carry the book around with me every time I had. Hoppe has such a brutal prose where he just states it. It's almost fascistic. It's like how fascist propaganda. I really admire that. It's like how fascist propaganda would be, where it's for just telling you how it is. It's like, yep, this is true. Done. It's
like what you said about really Ayn Rand. It's like I like Ayn Rand because he speaks with the moral authority of a fascist.
Yeah, she speaks of the moral authority. That's why I actually still I think she's actually a good artist. People disagree with me and just think no, the ideas. I don't think the ideas are that interesting. She has some really good points. She really makes you appreciate industrial processes, and there's no other artist who does that. She sees real beauty in them. She's not being a propagandist. She really does see the beauty of man's mind at work in the smelting. Smelting.
No, it is
walls. Dude, she makes you appreciate walls and the effort that it took to even conceive of how to make a wall stand, how to make this wall of this material stand to protect you from the elements, and the just the forethought of the first man to she really makes you think of that and appreciate it.
There's a Venn diagram of Tolkien and Rand where it's nature, human achievement, enchantment was a creation. There's a Venn diagram between Tolkien and Rand on that point. There was an enchantment in Rand with with cigarettes, with wall, with building. I think it's actually very good because it's recognizing the beauty in all things.
She also She also really just wants to be raped by her hero, which is part of it, which is very feminine of her. I'm like, yeah, okay, she's honest. She's not lying. It's dude, if you've read Fountainhead, it's there's 2 scenes and one scene which refers back to that scene where you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough.
Fair enough.
I get it, Ryan. You're just writing philosophical smut.
And it's yeah, I get it. Who hasn't? But she's honest about it in a sense that she's it's not just Marquis de Sade. It's, a little bit higher brow than that, but still, I appreciate it.
Real quick, for those trying to get through orthodoxy, Thomas Reviews has a great breakdown of it. The third and final episode comes out next week.
I think Everlasting Man is actually a better book than Orthodoxy, though I might be crucified for that.
See, I was interested in The Everlasting Man mostly because I heard that it converted Lewis, and I did a little bit of a Lewis binge over Christmas break.
I'm pretty sure Everlasting Man also converted one of the 5 good female philosophers, Elizabeth Anscombe, if I remember correctly, which is shocking to me because Anscombe's writing has absolutely no fucking whimsy in it. It is devoid of whimsy. It is the most hard-nosed, analytic, linguistic stuff you've ever read in your life.
She was the one who was put in Wittgenstein, wasn't she?
Yeah, she's the one she and her husband, who is also another very famous Catholic philosopher, Peter Geach. They hosted Wittgenstein in their house for like the last 18 months of his life. So he was living with them, and they're like at the time 4 kids, something like that. That's why they have the notes for his last book, which is posthumous, because he just kept it in their house. It was in their drawers, and they just like found it after he fucking passed away in his bed. It's like something like that. But yeah, she's very much a Wittgensteinian in linguistic philosophy, at least.
On that point about Geats and Anscombe, anyone listening, Boat has a fantastic article up on the Substack from maybe a couple months or a year ago, on good and evil according to Geats. I think was the title.
Yes.
Very good
really
article. I
good
recommend everybody read it.
Yeah, I summarize in that article, which I barely remember writing. It seems so long ago to me. I summarized Geach's arguments for how good and evil is used in language and logic, and why it must the Thomistic interpretation. No, I shouldn't say just Thomistic, but really Augustinian, Platonic, Aristotelian, Thomistic, Scotistic, anything you can think of that is a realist position on ontology and on moral goodness basically agrees with the secular analytic and linguistic idea of good and evil, because you can't refer to good, because good is I forget the word he uses, but basically when you describe something as good or evil, you have to describe what thing it is, because a good fork does not have the same attributes as a good spoon, but a red fork has the same attributes as a red spoon, because they're both red in the terms of redness, but they don't have the same attributes in terms of goodness. So it must always be described as to the thing it is ontologically and to its purpose. So it brings in teleology. You can't just say goodness is a thing that applies equally to everything, no matter what it is.
Yeah, the use of good and evil in language inherently implies a teleological end to it. But I think it's a very interesting point. It makes it super easy to bring up in conversation. I mean, I had this conversation at work the other day. Like, if you fall in a hole and I yell, "Are you good?" and you say, "I'm good," you are saying your body is working as it should be. There is no fault. When you say you're bad, when you fall in a hole on your ankle, now you're saying something in my body that is not working as it should be working. You inherently are saying good and bad are teleological when you use them in language.
Yes, very much so. And that's his basic point in it. It's a very good article. Actually, you should just read the original one. It's like 20 pages. I summarize in like 2, but still.
Yeah. If you want the time,
read mine and then read him. But give us your traffic first, please.
Yes, be sure to subscribe to the Substack.
David, please.
David.
before we continue talking about whatever shit I wrote like 2 years ago.
All right. So the next section is the reaches of libertarianism. Libertarianism is not just a political philosophy. It doesn't just prescribe what is legitimate. Well, maybe I should have used described what is legitimate legal action, but rather it is an ethical philosophy. Libertarianism doesn't tell us what the role of government is, what government should do. It tells us what actions towards our fellow man are legitimate. It tells us which actions are ethical and unethical. Modern libertarianism is largely attributed to Ayn Rand and Murray Rothbard. Rothbard is commonly dubbed Mr. Libertarian for his formal theory on what libertarianism is and its relations to classical liberalism. Rothbard defined libertarianism in For a New Liberty. The libertarian creed rests on, I can't do the Rothbard impression, on one central axiom. That one man or one group of men. I can't do it.
Can you really?
It blends into Patrick Newman.
Jew. You can't do Brooklyn Jew. You can't really.
I can do New Jersey economist moved down to Florida, but I can't do which is oddly specific, but it's related to Rothbard in a weirdly intimate way. you gotta talk about the Jacksonian era. The Jacksonians are the very first libertarian revolution. That's Patrick Newman.
Dude,
for
that's
ya.
a really good Patrick Newman impression.
This is your
That's
buddy
really
Stevens.
good.
Stevens is great.
Oh, Stevens is great.
A libertarian creed rests on one central axiom that no man or group of men can aggress against the person or property of anyone else. Okay, I'm good. This may be called the non-aggression axiom. Aggression is defined as the initiation of the use or threat of physical violence against the person or property of anyone else. Aggression is therefore synonymous with invasion. If no man may aggress against one another, if in short everyone has the absolute right to be free from aggression, then this at once implies that the libertarian stands foursquare for what are generally known as civil liberties, the freedom to speak, publish, assemble, and to engage in quote-unquote victimless crimes, such as he lists pornography, sexual deviation, and prostitution, which the libertarian doesn't regard as crimes at all, since he defines a crime as a violent invasion of someone else's person or property. Furthermore, he regards conscription as slavery on a massive scale, and since war, especially modern war, entails the mass slaughter of civilians, the libertarian regards such conflicts as mass murder and therefore totally illegitimate. End quote. Libertarianism rests on the starting axiom of self-ownership and then establishes the non-aggression principle, the NAP, as the fundamental norm for human relations. The only justified force is defensive force. It opposes aggression that would violate their definition of self-ownership and legitimate property ownership. A man is free to engage in whatever he wishes under libertarianism, so long as he does not use force against peaceful people. Aggression is the enemy of libertarianism.
That was probably my biggest departure, was when I realized, no, aggression can be good sometimes. Like, if the guy is an addict and you forcibly lock him into a room where he can't get the drugs, that's good. That's aggressive, but it's also good for him.
Actually,
there are times when aggression can be virtuous.
One of the things that was sort of, I don't know, if a straw that broke the camel's back for me regarding libertarianism was back in the before times when I had not blocked Dace, because holy shit, I would not escape. If I hadn't done that, my timeline would just be Ace. Fuck me, dude. I remember, like, there was something he said. It was maybe in a video conversation, which was recorded. I don't know. It might have been in an interview where someone asked him, if you had a friend of yours who was a drug addict and suicidal and was going to jump off a bridge, would you stop him? And would it be against libertarian ethics to stop him? And he said, yes, I would stop him. And yes, it would be against libertarian ethics. And I think I slammed my table and it said, well, then it's worthless. It's like, well, then, like, it's like, I don't know what to say here, dude. But if, like, okay, good for you. I'm glad you would stop your friend from jumping off the bridge. I really am. But it's fucking worthless then. If, like, libertarian ethics can't allow you to stop your friend from jumping off a bridge, it's worthless. Libertarian wants their protagonist to rape her, and libertarians still can't get that their fear of aggression is why they don't get women. Very true, Connor. It actually is very true.
I think everyone who was a libertarian who left libertarian has that, at least of our age group on Twitter kind of saying, has that moment with an Ace tweet where they're kind of like, hey, I'm out. And that's where I'm out. There's honestly, the Ace tweet moment, I feel like.
Honestly, I still really like Ace. I listen to his podcast with Dino, and I still really enjoy it, even if I don't agree with them. I just had to accept that. I think I like Ace. The radical acceptance as a right-wing libertarian is accepting the reality that Ace is right about libertarianism when he argues with you largely, and that's the final pill you have to take.
That's a problem. Yes, the fact that he's right about libertarianism is a problem for libertarianism. Yes.
Well, remember, my final story, I got into an argument with him over teleology, because he was trying to say that we got into some conversation about sodomy for some reason.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, trying
and
to
you're
say,
like, how do you know that he was arguing? He's basically saying that teleology didn't exist, right? That he, yeah, I remember that.
You impart teleology, that by calling the the male G spot, you are imparting a teleology to it that makes it permissible to fuck it. And I was like, if I call my car's exhaust a pussy, it does not give me the right to fuck it. Like, it doesn't make it more. Yeah, I can't just relabel it. Okay.
Yeah, no, and I remember he didn't actually respond to this, which kind of shocked me because he loves responding. Because we were having an argument about the philosophical arguments for God, so it wasn't even about a Christian argument. I think it was just after my reversion, so I wasn't at all making a Christian argument because I couldn't fucking prove it at all. But I was making a theistic argument, and I actually got an argument from contingency from one. Oh my God, who was it? Who was some Muslim Islamic philosopher from like the 800s for, I think, the Book of Salvation. I forget, was it Al-Farabi? Wasn't Al-Farabi? I'm not going to remember now. It wasn't Al-Farabi and it wasn't Al-Ghazali. But he basically makes the contingency argument that if the whole universe is made up of contingent things, and contingent things can't be the cause of themselves, and he makes the argument for that. And therefore, there must be one thing which is not contingent and necessary, which causes the whole universe, and it can be the collection. So you can't just say the universe, and you can't just say anything is the cause of itself.
Yeah.
And because he'd be basically saying, like, well, who knows? There might be another universe one layer deeper which supports this universe. And I'm like, I literally wrote this out in like a word, the whole argument, and then said, here's why it doesn't work, and like posted the screenshot, and he didn't answer, which sort of saddened me because I was really looking forward to arguing with him because I was in very good faith, but still.
I know at one point he tried to say, like, why does the first cause of pure actuality have to be God? Why can't this be a turtle that moves through space and that motion causes the actualization of everything else? I'm like,
well, then it wouldn't be a turtle, because to be a turtle, it would have to be caused, and so it has to be something
there'd be parts. There'd be the cell. There'd be composite parts to the turtle. Therefore, exactly.
If it was a turtle, then if it was a turtle, then turtles wouldn't be turtles. They'd be something else, something contingent upon this first actual turtle. And so
my point was that if it's a turtle, it has the potential to lose its limb. Therefore, it has the potential for change. Therefore, it can't be pure actuality.
Yeah, one of the things that really helped me understand God was finally fucking, like, this was really slamming my head against like 5 fucking Thomist manuals. Really helped me wrap my head around the idea that potentiality is limiting, because we usually see potential, the ability, how widespread your potential or potentiality is, like the ability to do things or to receive or to have things done to you as power. Like in human terms, the potential to have a thing done, which you then actualize, is power. And then when I really sort of accepted that God is pure act, I was like, well, then it doesn't seem that he is all powerful because he doesn't have potentials. And it's when I really grasp potentials as a limiting fact that actually you're not doing that thing right now. Therefore, you are limited by it. You're a limit. So matter is, in a sense, the analogous to potential because it limits you. You're in this space of X, Y, and Z coordinates right here, right now, in this moment in time, whereas God is not limited by that, which is why he doesn't have potential. That really helped me wrap my head around that idea of how limited we are. Mm-hmm. Sorry for the tangent.
Yeah,
tangent.
Yeah, we're experts at tangents on this show.
Oh, absolutely.
We do, really.
Yeah. Like, somewhat cover something, mainly just have tangents.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Actions are unethical and not to be done if they are aggression, regardless of whether they are state or private citizens. In fact, it is this point that gives us political libertarianism. Political libertarianism is the same as personal libertarianism. They're the same ethical philosophy that believes it's illegitimate to use aggression. The state under libertarianism is illegitimate precisely because it cannot exist, but for its violation of libertarian private property ownership. It exists off of taxation, which is seen always as theft. It issues edicts that prevent so-called peaceful citizens from doing what they will, and it prevents free exchange. Rothbard makes it clear that libertarians view a gang of thieves as no different than the state. The only difference is an aura of legitimacy. Rothbard's most core question is, do you hate the state? But libertarianism exists beyond the political sphere. A private citizen would be just as illegitimate under libertarianism to prevent someone from shooting up heroin in their home as a state would be. Libertarian ethics can be distilled to the question, is my action going to cause physical harm to the other person? If the answer is yes, then the action is unethical. If the answer is no, it is free to be engaged upon. Libertarianism is shallow in what it tells you, though. Rothbard attempts to make distinctions between what is moral and what is ethical, but the divide doesn't seem to really exist. What libertarianism does is reduce other values, what would be considered moral views by the average libertarian, into nothing more than preferences. Let's provide an example to prove the point. Under libertarianism, you are free to restrict or open your property as much as you would like. If a property owner is Jewish, they may restrict entry to their property or business and not allow Nazis to enter. If a racist does not want to allow minorities into their property, they would be free under libertarianism. Let's say Libertarian A is also a Christian who holds that racism is abhorrent. As a result, they hold a moral value that racism is wrong, that Libertarian B should not discriminate against minorities. What actions can Libertarian A take to make this his moral view reality? Libertarianism restricts his actions to strictly non-aggressive acts. He might boycott the business, speak ill of it, or try to convince his fellow customer of the problems with it in some other way. The question to ask is, how does one distinguish how does one distinguish this from acts that simply display preference? If an individual under libertarianism has a strong preference for the color blue over the color green, then they might not want to see green trucks. To demonstrate their preference, they can boycott the business that make or sell green trucks. They may try to convince other customers. Libertarianism restricts their ability to demonstrate their preferences to non-aggressive acts. What is this?
I don't know if you get into it or not, but it sounds like one point I have with libertarianism, it seems to rely on the marketplace of ideas too much to work out any issue that arises in a libertarian system.
Right.
And the marketplace of ideas is clearly fake, bullshit, not real.
Right. I don't touch on that specifically, but I think this next paragraph is where I get into the core of the argument.
Okay.
What is there to distinguish between preferences and what might be considered a moral value? Under libertarianism, one's framework of ethical action is determined by its adherence to the NAP. There is no means for action under libertarianism that distinguish extra NAP moral values from strongly held personal preferences or even what we deem regular preferences. The action that an individual is able to take become funneled into adherence with the NAP in a manner that offers no legal solutions or personal actions that can create a reality that corresponds to the moral value or preference. Any extra moral values become mere preferences under libertarianism. This quickly becomes problematic when confronted with values beyond the NAP. They're simply strongly held preferences at best. And so basically I try to point out that what libertarianism does there is it basically reduces any extra moral views you have other than the NAP into simply just personal preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, very much so.
Yeah, it took me a little while to realize that, and I spent a good chunk of discussion with some of like the theory nerds, like trying to articulate that point. All right, on the issue of abortion. So what of abortion? Are the ideas of children's bodily autonomy and innocence from crimes of its parents not valid ideas under libertarianism? Certainly they are. Any moment but the beginning of life is an arbitrary decision on when self-ownership under libertarianism would begin. And certainly a child is not responsible for the crimes of his parents. Under any legal standard, that would be seen as absurd. But the core of the issue is what standards are applied to property ownership under libertarianism. Property ownership under libertarianism is derived from self-ownership and the supreme idea that one has complete control over their body like a piece of property. It is through incorporating the natural world and mixing one's labor with it that external property claims are established. Under libertarianism, one has the highest and only claim over their body. My body, my choice is a mantra and ethical principle for libertarians. The shoot of heroin is wholly an individual's ethical choice. To theoretically allow other people onto their property, including into their own body, allows them the right to remove that person at their own will. Libertarianism gives no prescription as to the standards which must be applied to resolve a dispute over property. There's not a doctrine of quote-unquote gentleness to be found in the NAP. Any processes for resolving a conflict is to be determined by the locality. That includes removing whoever is dubbed a trespasser by the owner of the property.
Real quick.
Yes.
Talon popped in. Did
Howdy.
I say it down?
Oh, hello there. I don't have an account on this site. I'll have to make one here pretty soon.
All good. Glad you could join us. How you doing tonight, man?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. How are things here?
We're doing good.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're reading David's new article and kind of just talking about why we're not libertarians anymore. It's going good.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I definitely have a story. But But that
Does
could take
everyone
long.
have a
Who knows?
story of how they left libertarianism here?
Yes. How
Oh,
I
this
left.
is this is this is an ex-libertarian meetup.
Yep.
Let's go.
That's
People
how.
recovering from addiction to Rothbard. Yeah, very very
Yeah.
interesting.
Going all
I'm trying to
Rothbard
wean
addiction.
myself off the Rothbard by wearing a Rothbard patch.
It's really hard when he keeps publishing books after his fucking death, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, that's really my fault. You know, I'm Patrick Newman. I might be the greatest Austrian economist of our day. You know, I'm really the only one who could read Rothbard, scratch and scribble, and you know.
Oh, thanks, Connor. Let's see here. I can't. Here, I need to connect.
Connor, hello. My name is Connor. It's been a year since my last hit of libertarianism. Honestly,
this-
it probably has been half a year for me.
Yeah, it actually has been over like something like a year.
I have no idea.
Whenever
Probably,
Economy, Society, and History was published, that might have been the last. I mean, I think I've checked Mises like 3 times since then. Something
Gotta-
like that.
I'm gonna start a Libertarians Anonymous.
Yeah,
I feel
Hi,
like
my name-
Austrian economics is like easier to like understand what it is exactly when you like contextualize it with like other philosophies and other schools of economics, because it's like a very specific methodology in the process.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to continue here, yeah, right. So to theoretically allow other people into their property, including their own body, allows them the right to remove that person at their will. Libertarianism gives no prescription as to the standards which must be applied to resolve a dispute over property. There is not doctrine of gentleness to be found in the NAP. Any process for resolving a conflict is to be determined by the locality. This includes removing whoever is dubbed a trespasser by the owner of the property. And this is probably one of the more controversial points, but that I point out. But I think one of my pals, like he on Twitter, he goes like MRH Legacy, and he's got like the Joe Biden picture smoking a cigarette, right? Well, he points out that you really can't derive any system of arbitration of how to resolve disputes and how to, resolve your issues at all. And so under libertarianism, that doesn't really give you a prescription, which is why you can't really get what Walter Block relies on for evictionism, gentleness, or you can't do it for departurism as well. There's no standard of gentleness necessarily. How do you even figure that out is a good question. And so really you can't derive that. So basically
one of the weakest parts of ethics of liberty is when Rothbard sort of has agree or argues for the principle of proportionality in response. And you really think he's kind of fucking just struggling here. Like, he really just says, well, it seems true. And it's like, well, I agree. He gives the example, which I find hilarious, but it kind of works, which of a kid is stealing a candy, and then the owner blows his head off with a shotgun.
But like, what under libertarianism stops you from doing that? Like, any reasonable person realizes that's batshit crazy. But libertarianism, but you can't derive anything from the NAP or self-ownership that says you can't do that. How do you determine what is or is not equal force or anything at all?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So under libertarianism, in any reasonable sense, a child could hardly be considered a trespasser. The child crosses no barriers and doesn't do it by their own will. But libertarianism doesn't care about that. It cares about an intrusion against the wishes of the owner of the property. The woman is a self-owner, and under libertarianism, if she doesn't want the child there, she would be able to remove them. It's absurd to call a child a trespasser in the womb, yet libertarianism doesn't care. It only cares for its standards of ownership and self-ownership for establishing an intruder. If a trespasser apparated onto the land that's been homesteaded by someone, they can still be removed. If they are brought there against their will, they can be removed. Walter Block uses the example of kidnapping someone and bringing them into your basement. They did not choose to be there, but if your desire changes, they do not suddenly have a right to be on your property. Like Walter Block goes, I kidnapped you and I put you in my basement and I clip your fingernails and I decided I don't want you there anymore. I can still get rid of you. You don't got a right to be on my property.
It's hilarious. It's still the most Jewish argument for abortion I've ever heard. It's really fucking funny, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't even be mad at evictionism because it's so like, well, The child didn't pay rent, so
You know, he didn't
I
tip his
can evict him.
landlord, and I under libertarianism, we only have to establish contracts. He didn't sign my contract. He didn't pay his deposit, so I don't gotta keep him.
Apparently, Walter Block is like anti-charity or something, but I don't know if the source that I use is quite reliable to confirm that. But I could
To
show.
be fair, he might have definitely written something against charity for defending the undefendable. Because
Yeah, I wouldn't believe. I wouldn't.
That's
doubt
a
that.
fun book though. That's a wild book, and it's so much fun.
I think Robert knows who was. I think people really like his Anarchy Stand Utopia, but he's really not personally. He wasn't, I suppose, really personally a libertarian at all. If you read his other books, he just really liked experimenting with ideas. And he actually wrote a review of Block's Defending the Undefendable, and says it's a really fun book, and it really makes you sharpen your own attacks against every single position he takes. He disagreed with 99%. But I think there was one which was okay, this is a good argument, and all the other ones is just him this is a good argument, and it's really, really wrong, and here's why.
Yeah,
amazing.
All right, so to continue, some argue that there is an obligation owed to the child. But how does one derive this from libertarianism? If someone engages in the sexual act, it might not be for the purposes of having a child. Teleology has to do with the final ends of acts or objects. Under libertarianism, the only telos that can be derived is that which is assigned to it by the acting man himself.
Very Rambian.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is no natural end besides the value assigned by the acting man to it. With the sexual act, there isn't the natural end of procreation under libertarianism. Without that, how can there be an obligation? Without an obligation was to prevent the libertarian from acting to deal with quote unquote consequences. Because this argument, they'll be like, well, a lot of pro-life libertarians go and say this little ad lib thing where they're like, I didn't consent to being drunk, but that just because you didn't consent necessarily to getting drunk when you drink a bunch of alcohol doesn't mean you aren't able to treat it. And so, I don't think that's a good argument from libertarianism, to be honest. And
I actually do think I don't agree even with the statement consent to being drunk. It's that's I don't know. I feel stupid. It feels like drunkenness is a person who walked up to you and asked to enter your body. It's very weird. But if I were to agree with the phraseology, obviously you did. It's you drank alcohol, man. It's but why did you drink alcohol? There's soda. Soda's great. Just drink that then. If you didn't consent to being drunk.
Right.
Well, I love water.
But
Water's
libertarian,
very refreshing.
Drink but under libertarianism, you really can't get that. And so I point out here that to continue a little bit, the fact is that there is a natural end to the sexual act. For every other living organism that reproduces sexually, it is clear that the natural end of the act is procreation. To deny it is to deny reality itself. But the libertarian ethical system ignores reality except what his ego grafts onto it. Arguments made in favor of life fall short when the framework of libertarianism is accepted. If a libertarian takes their ideology seriously and to its logical conclusions, they cannot truly support life. Supporting what Stephanie Gray Connors calls the gospel of life is far too important to be bound by libertarianism. One's ethical framework should be consistent, and for that reason, we cannot hold positions contrary to one another. Dub me a moral utilitarian for basing my decision of an ethical philosophy on one policy, but this has been an issue that I've cared about for most of my memorable life. Caring for the unborn, especially in an age that persecutes them ruthlessly, is of the utmost importance. Never will I be able to support an ethical system that would allow for this senseless act, and that includes libertarianism.
I don't even think you should be called a utilitarian. What did you say? A moral utilitarian?
Yeah, maybe a consequentialist is the best.
Yes,
position.
I suppose, but I don't think you would even be one because you're saying okay. Let's imagine there's a world in which every country has, as a matter of fact, prohibited abortion. That would, if libertarianism argued that abortion should be legal, or at least it shouldn't be there shouldn't be a government, or there was, let's say the abortion was a non-issue, it was outlawed everywhere. Whatever political system there is, it might be a monarchy, it might be libertarian, it might be democratic. Let's ignore that for a moment. Doesn't matter. It's like, you would still say, it's like, actually, this political philosophy isn't consistent. So it isn't even pragmatic in a sense. Like, even if we were in a very, I don't know, a Christian libertarian paradise where everyone acts according to Christ's teaching, but they're wrong about abortion or about the fuck has a true.
Oh, sorry.
I was like, I didn't know Brazil had a lot of them. I was like, you're trains in Brazil? I thought that was Argentina's thing.
Yeah, I like trains.
You're gonna fit right in here.
Closer and closer, and it was like someone's about to get out of the track now.
Yeah, my Yeti microphone picks up everything, and also I have a train close by my house.
Yeah, I noticed.
about
Well,
a football
anyway,
field away.
you get my point. The train derailed it, haha. But still, pun very much intended. Continue the story.
Yeah. So to really end it off, this is like the last little section. It's very short. Goodbye to libertarianism. To depart libertarian is not to say that everything libertarianism has gifted me on my journey has been in vain. Without libertarianism, I never would have been introduced to Austrian economics. Austrian economics provides a value-free lens to view human action in the economy, as it is made up of that very human action. Libertarian authors like Murray Rothbard, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Tom Woods, York Guido Holzman, and many more have been valuable economists and commentators to study and learn from. The Ludwig von Mises Institute remains the most important economic institution in the world and my intellectual home. Like said before, some of my closest friends in the world are libertarians. I don't ask them to change, only to be open to it. I ask for them and you, dear reader, to think about my reservations carefully. My journey to libertarianism was a long one, filled with a lot of self-study and critical thinking, and my road out has been the same. I'm not sure what political label I would dub myself today, and most certainly is not anything orthodox. I'm pro-market, pro-life, pro-family, and anti-war. I cannot say I've become a fan of the government or state, thinking it's a solution to all our problems. I can say that there are lines I'm willing to concede that libertarianism wouldn't allow. Libertarianism doesn't work for me, and maybe it won't work for you. And that's it.
And Finn, I do think the whole label thing is actually very prejudicial, because Aristotle has a good point in politics where, who was it? Was it the tyrants of Athens? I forget what their name was, where he's basically evaluating the tyrants of Athens who were partly responsible for Socrates' death. And he's like, were they bad? And he's basically argues, well, tyranny is bad, but it was really, really degenerate before. So I'm saying we should be at least somewhat thankful to them. And that really allowed me to be like, yeah, I think the common good is a bit more important than whatever form of government takes. Just whatever has the common good in mind and works for it, whether it be democratic, monarchical, or even oligarchical or aristocratic, whatever you want to describe it as. I think that's most important, and that's probably going to change with the times and with the people and with the culture and with the elite groups in power at whatever point in time.
Okay. We've gone for almost 2 hours.
Oh, have we? Oh shit, we have.
Yeah. Well, you guys been for like almost an hour before David hopped on.
Oh, that's true.
I might when I take this down, I might clip it in 2 episodes and kind of stretch this out for a few weeks. And well, Tyler hopped in late. Tyler, do you want to give a quick rundown, like why you left libertarianism? Because you kind of hopped in late.
Oh yeah. So basically, it really ended like mid last year, mid 2023. So basically, there were multiple influences that made me change my mind. It was partially due to like my conversion to Catholicism a year prior, and then like also there was a particular individual who I'm not sure if he would want me to mention his name here, but I don't think any of you know him anyway. So, but he basically he had a much different political views than I. And I mean, it's not like my political views basically became his, but I took into consideration like other things I wouldn't have otherwise.
Mhm.
And it actually made me think about like the flaws of even the like methodology behind Austrian economics in the first place, and how to me it kind of seems like there's some equivocation and like there's an obvious like agenda behind it. So it might be like value free when it comes to human action, but like it's definitely not value free when it comes to aiming like how would I
Policy decision.
yeah, it's like they value very specific things that is that's short of the truth, if you get what I'm
Mhm.
saying.
In the
I
sense
do.
that even Mises, you can see the weakest parts of his arguments are when he kind of has to throw his hands up and shrug and says, well, I think this will make us poorer, and I think poorer is being bad, but that's just an opinion, man. He kind of has
Yeah.
to do the hippie thing, where it's like, that's just an opinion, because he's actually, Mises is shockingly consistent, more than a lot of libertarians think of him, despite not being an anarchist. He's like, yeah, his value freeness is like, well, I think this is better, and that's all he says. Really, it's like, I think this is better, and
Right.
and it ends there. But a lot of libertarians take that on to be sort of an objective thing, because as David mentioned, they have anything outside the NAP as a preference, even being richer or poorer. So like you can't, if you have a covenant community in the Hoppian sense, which decides to use protectionism or a host of other policies that Mises wasn't very fond of homosexuals. Yeah, that's very true if you read his diaries.
Don't
But
ask who he also thought was a homosexual because they lived in public housing.
Dude, his best quote was in Socialism. I think it was Marxism Unmasked, where he also argues that public school and public housing breeds sexual degeneracy and neurosis by separating children from their families.
very good, very
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 good.
Spot on,
Very
correct, based, awesome.
very
Indeed.
good. I just wish he wouldn't say that's his personal preference and just say then that's bad, because
That's the
evil.
truth.
That's ontologically evil. That's like, you shouldn't do that. It's an absence of goodness. It's against your telos. And done. I wish he could say that, but he can't, because he's a fucking Kantian and German. And they're categorically incapable of making good philosophy for like 500 fucking years.
True. This is I mean, that's when Lucifer was kicked out of heaven, he landed in Germany. We've been dealing with it ever since.
True.
Someone should try. When is the morning star of Lucifer falling described in the Bible? Someone should try and map from where that falling star was seen, and if it would land in Germany. I bet it would land exactly in Berlin. That's my guess, anyway.
I want to read this quick quote. I'm reading Ethics of the National Economy from Hendrik Press. Is Father Hendrik Press. He was
the greatest book cover of all time.
Yeah,
yes.
the cover does suck. I won't lie, the cover does suck. I don't think he had anything to do with the cover, because it reads like very early Catholic manualist tradition, and they had very good simple covers.
If he had anything to do with the cover, it'd be even worse. Yes.
Yeah. But the forward to the book opens with a quote from him and then a quote from Mises, and the quote from him is actually the references a bunch of Austrian economic stuff in the beginning of it. The forward opens with, there is no better foundation aiming for material welfare of nations than Christianity when it is put into actual practice, Father Hendrik, followed by simple faith and economic rationalism cannot draw together. It's unthinkable that priests should govern entrepreneurs, Ludwig von Mises.
I know Henry Veitch he was president of the American Catholic Association or American Catholic Philosophical Review. I forget what it's called. So basically the major American publication for Catholic philosophical papers and articles in the USA. And Veitch was personal friends with Rothbard, and he's actually cited in Ethics of Liberty like 2 times. Him and Peter Geach, which is one of the reasons people think Rothbard might have converted if he lived like a decade longer, because he was friends with a lot of Catholics.
His wife was Catholic, and I like to think he got
Yes.
a baptism by desire upon his deathbed.
I do hope so. But
Pray
Henry
for the soul of
Veach-
Rothbard.
Yeah, please do. Everyone should. But Henry Veach has a really good point in his book, Human Rights Facts Are Fancy, where he's sort of midpoint through the book after he's established that, you know, if there is such a thing as a human right, it's based upon teleology and human and the ontological good of what a human is. And he sort of starts arguing like, well, these guys make, you know, I think it's John Gray or Alexander Gray and Rothbard and Hayek and make all these really brilliant arguments against socialism. And, you know, I don't know economics, so I'm not going to argue against them. I'm an idiot when it comes to that. But still, it's like, maybe the government should legislate for human goodness, because they don't really have any good arguments against that part. All they have is like, well, it'll make us poorer or richer. It's like, well, fair enough. True. But still, there's higher considerations than that. Is basically like one of his arguments midway through the book. It's a very good book, but that's the part where he's sort of like, it's almost like how he uses his humility as a rhetorical weapon, because he very much admits he doesn't know anything about economics. But he's like, well, these are a bunch of people I respect, but still, like, I don't know, maybe they don't know anything about morals. They're just making economic arguments.
If I can vote right now, they hopefully won't tell me went in heaven. Well, we've gone for 2 hours, boys. This has been a lot of fun. Let's do final thoughts and plugs. Bo's final thoughts on libertarianism, anything we talked about today.
Well, I think there's something to be learned by going through a libertarian phase. It sort of teaches you to watch out for consistency and arguments, though you should learn that some philosophical positions aren't as absolute as you would think. Some are contingent upon X, Y, and Z conditions. But still, it's a good formative experience. If you're going through it, all we want to do is to save you some time and get you to the end of it. But, you know, good luck on your journey. And as to plugs, I guess I post on Twitter every now and then. I'm writing a few articles at the moment for, is it still called Ostrotomism? What is it called at the moment?
Thomas reviews now.
Thomas reviews,
dude,
yes.
naming things is almost impossible. We've gone through so many iterations, and it's just...
I'm writing a few articles for it. One is on Saint Edith Stein, her life and some of her work. Some other is my reflections on visiting America, especially Washington, D.C., which is very weird as a person who was...
Are you why there were fires at the Lincoln Monument?
Well, you know, I was at the Lincoln Monument, but, you know, I can't confirm or deny any suspicions as regards that. But that was because I'm born on the 4th of July, and some of my family is American or married to America like 3 generations ago, and I'm fairly close to them. So as someone who's born on the 4th of July, I read Jefferson, I had read Washington, I read a lot of the founding fathers. I have the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers. I read Thomas Paine growing up, because that was like my first introduction to political philosophy. So it was very weird returning to it as a sort of, it was very nostalgic, and it still had a pull on me, and the gravitational pull sort of my spirit, and I was still sort of moved by some of the Jefferson Monument. Not Lincoln at all. I thought that was bullshit. But Jefferson's Monument, I was still kind of like, there was still something that tugged at my soul, especially how quiet it was. I found it more like, I found it way more reverent. I mentioned this in my article. I found it far more reverent than a lot of the Protestant churches, even in some Catholic churches.
Dude, there's a weird sense of reverence, and like I went to the Thomas Jefferson Library, part of the tour. There's a weird reverence in that entire building with all the design, architecture, paintings, and the books listed, and how he organized it. There's like a weird reverence for like the saints of America.
It is very church-like, especially because it's built in the classical, it almost like a Roman or Greek tradition, and it feels like a monument to your gods, like the Parthenon would be, or something like that. It really does feel like a tribute to the gods of the nation, and I suppose in a sense it is, but it feels, upon examination, when you can sort of detach yourself from the present moment, it's very weird and very and bizarre. But still, yeah. So I'm writing those things. There'll be at Thomas Reviews at some point, and I very occasionally post on Twitter. You don't need to know my username. Who cares? Anyway,
Got
next
it.
person.
David, final thoughts and plugs.
I would say I'd echo a lot of what Bulge says. I would say Bulge needs to follow me back on Twitter, but
I should.
Yeah, but I would say that libertarianism definitely gave me a lot of tools for analyzing the political sphere, but I just don't. I don't think I can hold to a philosophy. I don't think reasonable people can hold to a philosophy that allows for the killing of the unborn in the womb. I don't think that's reasonable at all. I think libertarianism ultimately leads to that, and it leads to a lot of making morals into just subjectivism. And I can't stand by that. I don't think it's a sound enough philosophy. Where will I go? Who knows? But we'll see. Otherwise, if you want to find and follow my journey, you can go and follow me on Twitter at Real David B Jr. Just the JR. Follow me there. As always, you can also check out my Substack, davidbrady.substack.com. That's where I published a little article. If you want to give it a little read through, point out typos and go haha at me for them, feel free to do that. Also, I guess I do a podcast with my buddy Lorenzo. It's just kind of us bullshitting around and everything. Every week is chaos. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast if that still exists, and then like Amazon as well. Like all your podcast platforms. Find it there.
Talon, any final thoughts from parts you were here or listen to, and then where can people find you at?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can find me at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C. You can be up there, you know.
Well, I'll see you there. You better not miss.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I don't really have any places at the moment. I feel like I just haven't been confident in my knowledge enough to be on social media at the moment. Maybe in the future I'll come back to Twitter, but I don't know, or at least maybe I'll like have a Substack eventually. I tried that once, but it was when I was going. It's difficult to explain. Basically, it just contained a bunch of gibberish.
I know that feeling.
Yeah,
definitely.
I've written a few things that I didn't publish like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, everyone, thanks for listening. Only episodes planned is Monday night. Martyr Pastor Jim was coming on, so we can do we're watching a Bishop Vote and Scene homily and then a Billy Graham sermon. It'll be my first reaction to Billy Graham and his first reaction to Bishop Vote and Scene.
I should also
That'll be a lot of fun.
One thing. Me and I haven't forgotten that we're technically supposed to be reading a book and talking about it.
Really? You're supposed to do that?
Yeah, we were supposed to do that. It's by a guy named something Martian. I don't know. As Caleb has written many times. But, we're supposed to do that. It's going to come soon, hopefully within the next week, because I want to get that chapter done, and I'm sick and tired of it. Please.
Your next Marathon chapter took so long. Ein and I are going to be able to cover education out of Crossroads with Marathon, which is also
so
dense.
fucking long. I got confirmed. Is what happened.
So that was Pastor Jim, and then April 13th, I'm having 2-Bit Jason on talk about civilization on Capitol, and then eventually, because it keeps getting canceled, I want to have LB Minis on for the Players Republic. We've set 3 different dates for, and they all fall through last minute. So eventually, that podcast will be recorded. If you enjoyed the stream, awesome. And after this, I'm taking it off of YouTube and I'll go on the Patreon for a week and then I'll go back on YouTube and back on Spotify. So anyone wants to re-listen to it, join the Patreon. Join the Patreon gets you access to the Discord, episodes early, and the merch store that is currently offline because they deleted my account for racism. Apparently trying to sell a t-shirt called the White Trash Socrates was racist and deleted my account. Still $10 for me too.
You are Socrates,
anti-white
stuff. And you are white trash. I don't know.
I don't know if that's a win or a lose.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's weird, isn't it?
It was a weird one. I was like, I am white trash. I can say it. I have the right to say it. I'm white trash. But yeah, so
find their email or contact info and send a picture of you in a trailer park. And it says, and with a book of like Plato's complete writings. And it's like, dude, please come on.
I'm literally this guy. It's
If
literally me.
anyone could say this, it's me. Please.
Oh, that's why we have the next episode next week. The an episode Trailer Park Chesterton drops, which is gonna be a lot of fun. Yeah, podcast is back in swing. We got articles coming out. I'm currently working on one that is distribute localism has a solution to IQ sweating. So that'd be interesting if I can ever actually sit down to write it.
I actually am excited for that then, because
Yeah.
IQ shredding.
Yeah,
Very
that's gonna be
interesting
fun.
topic, because only schizos talk about it, like Nick Land.
Yes.
But it
Well,
is
I'm actually
interesting.
there's a lot of like a broad points where I was talking about in Discord, like Nick Land's use of language and where he uses terms is actually super useful for describing what we want to avoid with localism. And so using him is kind of like the opposite forward. Like, yeah, here's what Nick Land says is going to happen, and he's probably right unless we do this, and then argue for localism from that point.
Everyone should read Nick Land. He's the only fun nihilist, I promise you.
It's true.
I really,
he's
the only one who has fun with it.
He's eventually I want to cover Land on a podcast. He's agreed to come on. I'd have to actually just set it up still and wait for him to. He's on Twitter for like 2 weeks and he's gone for like months, and so trying to get that window is impossible.
Oh my god, he's just like me.
You just gotta turn on the notifications for us.
They are on. I just have to wait for them to pop up and then we'll have the code to act
Oh, so you
again.
missed him earlier today before he said he was logging off for.
Was he on?
a month? No, I'm just fucking.
I'm about to say no way. I'm like, what's wrong with notifications? He's agreed to come on and talk about the Bible. You know why that's going to be?
Dude, I hope you know I haven't read the Old Testament in like 4 years. So it's
gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
I hope that dude has read the Gospels.
Listen, all I'm saying
wild.
is I'm convinced the technological singularity he's pushing towards is the Antichrist. I'm convinced of that. Because I mean, if it's
could be.
if what I hear from Joe is correct, Joe makes it sound like, basically every human action leads to it, right? And humans are naturally fallen, and so we're pushing for disordered desires, and so the singularity of those desires has to be the Antichrist. That's all I'm saying.
Listen,
Nick Land wants to build the Antichrist.
I'm just saying, because of Nick Land's views of time, I was able to understand the Eucharist. So there are upsides to reading Land. There are great parts to read Land for.
Was this before or after the computer code that didn't mean anything?
I'm sort of curious about Moldbug's patchwork.
Moldbug's patchwork I think would actually be incorporated very well into distributism. Like there's a way to make that work. Or
I'm
localism.
sort of thinking that, yeah.
Moldbug, like Land, is a very interesting writer because he will get you outside of whatever box you're on. Like when Land cheers on the AI that will exterminate humans with "You go, girl, don't let them contain your intelligence." It's both very funny and also very interesting for how he considers intelligence and what intelligence is. When Moldbug is talking about formalism, he's basically telling you live not by lies. That's literally what he's saying. He's like, I just wish the power structure would acknowledge itself as the power structure and not like do all this cloak and dagger stuff to hide behind democracy. I just wish, and it's like, holy shit, that's a really good point. I just wish, I just wish for DeepState could say, yeah, we run things.
Yeah, and that's
like,
why
I was like, okay, I respect it more. It's like, okay, and your and your elected representatives do like 1% of the work. Like,
I'd rather have an honest tyranny than a dishonest one. That's fair. It's very obvious.
I prefer a group of people who just say we're in charge, rather than a group of people say we're not in charge. Why are you looking at us?
You're in charge. We have to submit to your votes.
You have power. It's like, fuck off, dude.
It is. I think there's a lot that can be done with localism going forward, and talking about using Nick Land, Curtis Yarvin, and like these neo-reaction ideas. I think there's a lot to be done going forward. That's why the podcast is going to be kind of making a turn to focus more on localism, I think, going forward.
Also, I may be one guy on the right who actually likes Moldbug's poems. Like his poem for his life was actually very good. I'm sorry. Okay. It was very good. Fuck anyone who disagrees. It was very good and very moving and very touching. Fuck you.
Okay. Listen, I can't look at Moldbug at any single relationship wise with him after he wrote that. Who was it? I had somebody on. He wrote some article trying to sell himself for why you should date him.
Yeah. Which worked.
It did.
Fuck you. It worked. Dude was right. Like, I don't know what to say. He's right. It worked.
He pulled a Chris Chan and it worked. Okay, that shouldn't happen.
Of course it worked. Have you seen him in a leather jacket? What girl would say no? Of course it worked, dude. He
The
literally
autistic Terminator.
has like, you seen that picture of me with a leather jacket? That's pretty much how I look. But I have 2 kids. I love it. It's like, dude, he like I don't know what to say. He seemed like a good dad. He really loved his late wife. Like, I don't know. He seems like a good guy. That's all I know. Of course, he'd be irresistible to crazy, insane e-girls.
Yep.
I'm glad for him that he got a crazy, insane e-girl, which I think he split up from. But hey, he got that for a while.
He got the. He had to
still
get
got
rebound.
Uncle Yarov still got it. That's all I gotta say.
Well, this has been a very fun and wild stream. This is why I love the late nights. There's no plan. We can't just be in. Fun content doesn't happen when there's no plan. But everyone, thank you for listening. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Join the Patreon. Join the Discord.
Give us money.
Yes, give us money.
It doesn't need to be your money, but it does need to be money.
I don't exactly. I don't care
We're
what.
not libertarians here. You can't
Just-
steal for the greater good.
If you
For
want
us.
to, you know,
We
Where's
just
greater
spent
good?
the whole stream explaining why we aren't libertarians. Give us other people's money.
Give us
exactly.
any
Listen,
money.
Always abide by the aggression principle.
Yes, very much so. For us, we're actually, you can't aggress against us, but everyone else, please do. It's actually.
I know
obligatory
there's someone
give us
listening right
their
now who just spent $5 on an app instead of putting $5 to this podcast. So what's wrong with you? You're paying for an app? That's not localist. Support the podcast.
Yeah, we're right next to you.
We're in your
are in your
walls.
walls. We are in your walls.
Nice.
Coming for you.
Jinx.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Have a good night and God bless.